What's up, everybody? I know it's a little late, but I'm finally here with some thoughts on The Last of Us 2. It's been 6 years since our original adventure across the United States with Ellie and Joel. And thanks to Joel's decisions at the end of that journey,
come on, baby girl. I got you.
the world is still fucked up and filled with mutated mushroom sauce.
Campbell's Cream of Mushroom Soup.
In The Last of Us 2, Ellie and Joel have settled down in a decently sized community filled with other survivors of varying ages.
Holy shit! Get to cover! Go! Go!
They spend their days helping clear out zombies from nearby locations to keep the settlement safe during the day, and party with other survivors in the town at night. The biggest takeaway from these opening scenes, though, is that there is clearly a lack of trust and little to no communications between Ellie and Joel.
How do you...
Joel, it's pretty late and I gotta get up in a few hours.
Yeah.
Anyone who played the first Last of Us game can easily come to the conclusion that this is coming from Ellie's suspicions of what Joel did to save her from being killed in that game.
And she believed you?
I didn't say otherwise.
Before these issues can be resolved, Joel and his brother Tommy have an unfortunate run-in with Abby and her friends.
Felt like you heard of us or something.
Because they have.
And when Ellie is told that Joel never came back from his patrol, she searches for him and arrives at their location just in time to see Abby going for a hole-in-one with Joel's head.
Please don't shoot! Joel, please get up!
Now, I didn't realize it during the moment that this happened in-game, but this is the point at which the storyline went into a complete freefall. Ellie immediately goes into full-on revenge mode and vows to kill Abby and all of her friends and bring back Tommy after he went out for the same reasons. And I love Ellie and all, but there's just so many instances of her acting like a complete fucking idiot on this journey, and I just can't get over it. Ellie's traveling with her new girlfriend Dina, and discovers that Dina is pregnant with her previous boyfriend's child.
I think I'm pregnant.
They don't travel back home to get her the help she needs, even though she can barely function. Instead, Dina just hangs out in an abandoned theater with nothing but a fucking chair holding the doors closed. And I can understand that they need to find Tommy, but Tommy is clearly more capable of taking care of himself than a sick, pregnant Dina is. Later, Dina's ex-boyfriend shows up, and even then, Ellie and him still go out to search for Tommy instead of bringing Dina home. They claim that Dina wants Jesse to help Ellie, but honestly, who gives a shit what she wants?
You're good with leaving Dina by herself?
Her orders.
Dina is clearly the priority here, even if she doesn't realize it herself. At a certain point, Jesse questions Ellie to make sure that once they find Tommy, they're going back home to get Dina help, and he wants to make sure Ellie's okay with not getting to kill Abby. Ellie says that that's the plan, and then immediately splits up with Jesse when given the opportunity to go after Abby. My biggest problem with this is Jesse's reaction. He just says some shit like, "Oh well, you're on your own if you do this." Why doesn't he actually say something like, "Ellie, what the fuck is wrong with you? You're being a jackass right now." But no, it just seems like Ellie is gonna go after these people no matter what kind of stupid decisions she has to make, and nobody is the fucking voice of reason at all.
Nothing. Good.
If you can ignore that stupid shit, Ellie's story isn't really that bad. You can argue that it basically boils down to a simple revenge plot, but I think it was really quite interesting seeing Ellie come to terms with violently interrogating and killing Abby's friends one by one. In a weird way, it almost kind of reminds me of how she acted in the first game when she was trying to escape that weird rapey guy and she hacked him up. When Ellie kills someone that pushes her to the edge either by trying to violate her or by killing someone that she probably cared for more than anyone else, it's brutal, and she kinda goes into shock afterwards, but it also seems like the only way she knows how to deal with these situations. And I do wish that the toll all this violence took on Ellie was explored a little more than it was. The other part of Ellie's story, and perhaps the best part of this game, are her memories of Joel. It's been some years since the events of the first game, and through Ellie's memories, you get to see a bunch of the ups and downs in her and Joel's relationship in that time. Seeing Joel blow Ellie's mind with a touch of normalcy by bringing her to a museum to see dinosaurs and space exploration equipment for her birthday was something I didn't know I needed to see, and it's easily my favorite scene in the entire game.
Happy birthday, kiddo.
Then, there's a memory of Joel actually telling Ellie the truth about what happened in the first game, and you finally get a definite answer for why there's tension between them now.
So I stopped them.
Oh my God.
And finally, she remembers telling him that she wants to work on forgiving him at a point that seemed like it was just a few days before he died. I think that this memory is the main reason for Ellie being so adamant on getting revenge. Her whole motivation for killing Joel's murderers was because it was the only way Ellie could think of to show that she forgave Joel and that she really did still care about him as much as she ever did. Halfway through the game, you start playing as Abby and are immediately thrown into a flashback that shows you how her dad was the surgeon that was going to operate on Ellie to make a cure for the mushroom sauce, and that her dad was also one of Joel's victims during his rampage through the hospital to save Ellie. This is Abby's entire reason for wanting to get revenge on Joel, and we're meant to sympathize with her on this, but I definitely don't give a shit, and I'll talk more about that in a second. Anyway, after the flashback, we play as Abby and see what she was doing in the same time period as when Ellie was hunting her down and killing all of her friends. The bulk of Abby's story revolves around her group of people's war with the Scars.
Ambush! Hang on! Take them out! What the fuck you think we're doing?
And more importantly, how she goes out of her way to save Yara and Lev, which are two outcasts from that group. First of all, there's two giant factions at war that I think could have been given a lot more attention in this game. For example, the leader of Abby's group is talked about so much, and then you see him for like 5 seconds, and the last 3 seconds are him getting killed.
No! What the fuck?
Then there's Abby's relationship with Lev and Yara. To me, this entire part of the storyline is just used to make you think that Abby isn't some heartless murderer after she kills Joel. But at this point, I already hated Abby. Eventually, Yara is killed and it's just Abby and Lev, and it's at this point in the story that I realized that not only did Abby kill Joel, she's now meant to be the new replacement Joel. Get the fuck out of here. I guess now's a good time to talk about why I absolutely can't stand Abby. And it's not because she's a woman or because she has the tits of a 13-year-old boy for some reason. I'll put it to you this way. The first Last of Us came out about 6 years ago. That means I had 6 years to replay that game multiple times. And I never replayed that game because I loved the gameplay that much. I replayed it so many times to re-experience Joel and Ellie's relationship as they cross the United States. In the beginning of that game, there's a big 10-year time skip between when the outbreak starts and when you pick up as Joel after those 10 years. And it's heavily implied that Joel does some fucked up shit to get by in that time. So I already know Joel isn't the nicest person to begin with. But over the course of that adventure, he warms up and becomes almost like a father to Ellie. I've seen Joel do some insane things to protect Ellie, like going out in a huge blizzard to find Ellie immediately after recovering from being impaled with a metal spike, or going head to head with an entire hospital filled with fireflies just to save Ellie from dying.
I won't let you take her. This is our future. Think of all the lives we'll save.
And I've seen this story over and over again for 6 years. Abby's shitty flashback and a half a game of her kind of being nice to Lev doesn't really make me take her side and make me feel like she could be a new Joel. Naughty Dog set this character up to be hated whether they intended to or not. It also doesn't help that half of Abby's friends talk to her like they hate her.
You're a piece of shit, Abby.
Aside from hating Abby, her story is also kind of interesting, but of course, that's not because of Abby or any of her friends. The real stars of her story are Lev and Yara, brother and sister runaways trying to escape their murderous former group of people for a mysterious reason. That's definitely the kind of Last of Us story I can get behind. If it didn't feel so forced, I also would have loved the mysterious reason that involves Lev actually being born a girl and promised to an elder from the group for marriage, and him shaving his head and wanting to be a fighter instead. And before anybody gets mad about me feeling it's forced, I will try to explain my reasoning in a bit. Of course, Lev isn't an exception to characters making stupid decisions. Lev gets his sister killed because he wants to go back to the Scars to find their mom, even after Yara pretty much tells him that their mom is just as likely to kill him for what he did. And then, of course, you gotta chase after Lev and go to the Scar village. And once you find him, you find out that he killed his mom because she attacked him. Just like Yara said.
She just kept yelling. She started chasing me, trying to make her stop.
And then Yara dies on her way back out of the village, which she wouldn't have been in if it wasn't for Lev. If you played the first Last of Us, then you pretty much know how this game plays. You spend a lot of time exploring abandoned areas looking for supplies and notes that tell little stories about people's lives and experiences, while the main characters have little conversations with each other about a bunch of different topics. When you encounter enemies in this game, whether they are zombies or other humans, your best chance at survival is to sneak around and pick them off one by one with as little noise as possible. Although you can run into these situations guns blazing if you really wanted to. In my opinion, you're kind of encouraged to go in loud sometimes, especially when you're playing as Abby. There's just some areas where no matter what I did to be sneaky, somebody caught me, and most of the enemies that would attack after dropped a bunch of ammo. Both Ellie and Abby have a wide selection of guns to use and can craft explosives and other useful items as well. For example, both characters get either a bow or a crossbow, which is great for killing enemies silently.
I'm gonna find you.
But both characters don't get this for a while, so in the meantime, you can craft silencers with limited usage for your handgun to still perform silent kills.
Another man down.
Each character can also gain new skills and abilities by guzzling down a bunch of pills that you usually find in bathroom sinks. Then you get to pick skills based on how high as fuck you are at the moment. Just like the first Last of Us with Joel, Ellie and Abby also have the superhero ability to hear enemies and know their exact position. Obviously, you'll be using this a lot if you're trying to be sneaky. I have 3 major problems with the gameplay. The first problem would occur whenever I wasn't being sneaky and I was having a shootout with some human enemies. If I was hiding behind cover, I could see someone running up to me and then taking cover near me, and if I tried to wait for them to expose themselves, they wouldn't. But if I turned my camera to look at another enemy for even 1 second, the first enemy would immediately run up to me and start shooting. And it always feels like some cheap bullshit. Honestly, after a whole game's worth of that nonsense, I'm really not looking to jump right in and play again. My second problem is a lot of the time, if an enemy is fighting you out in the open, they will almost always get the first shot. If you pop out of cover to line up a shot, they'll instantly shoot you first. And this is another annoyance that keeps happening throughout the whole game. Now with these first 2 problems, I will admit that both of them are easily avoided by being sneaky. But sometimes you just want to use your guns. They aren't there for decoration. My last problem happened when I died a couple of times in the same spot. When I loaded back in, there was an item on the floor that just had a question mark symbol. I picked it up not knowing what it was and soon realized that I was unable to press the square button to punch anything. After coming to the conclusion that it was the question mark item that was doing this, I looked in all of the menus on the pause screen and searched everywhere online, and I still couldn't figure out what this item was and why it was preventing my square button from working. Eventually, I finally figured out that the game had given me an unbreakable shiv, probably because of how many times I died in that one spot. And you can't swing this shiv around the same way you would swing around a crowbar or a wrench. And that's why my square button wasn't working. The problem is that I was at a point in the game where it took me at least an hour to find a new hand-to-hand weapon to replace that shiv and get my punches back. That is some real bullshit, and the search to figure out what happened almost made me stop playing entirely. I'm going to start by saying that I do think Naughty Dog dropped the ball on this one. The story in this game, while interesting in some areas, just doesn't do it for me. Characters make stupid decisions that put their groups at risk throughout the entire game and aren't called out for their shit ever. I think that Abby could have been more likable if they had waited a little bit before having her kill Joel, but they didn't. As soon as she killed Joel in the beginning of the game, I stopped caring about her, and that made all her good deeds not matter to me. Maybe if I would have seen some of her good deeds first, I'd think differently about her. I honestly think that Ellie's and Lev and Yara's journeys in this story is what carries this game, and even those have some pretty big flaws. I really thought that at the end of the game, Ellie would finally get Abby back for what she did. And eventually, you do find Abby captured, tied up, and left to die by some third group of people that I just didn't even give a shit about because they arrived so late in the game and aren't given any kind of detail. It would have been ridiculous to see Ellie just leave Abby tied up. But Ellie cuts her down and forces her to fight. And you don't even fucking kill her. You don't even get the option of killing or sparing her. Ellie literally loses everyone she cared about because of Abby, whether it's because they're dead or they've given up on Ellie because of how she handled the Abby situation. And you just let her go? Fuck that. I already mentioned how useless the third faction is. They're just people Ellie gets to kill on her way to Abby. All of this is just stupid, and I can't think of another way to describe it. I said I would talk more about why the whole situation with Lev felt forced, and really, it's not just Lev. Ellie is a lesbian, Dina is a bisexual, Lev is trans, and the problem for me isn't these characters' sexual orientation or gender. It's the fact that it feels like the people at Naughty Dog sat down and said, we have to represent everyone, and the audience has to be constantly reminded of what they are. And that leads directly into my other thought on this situation. If you want to represent different sexual orientations and genders, why can't they just be? Why do they need to have a problem associated with it? Ellie, Dina, and Lev all have gigantic storyline beats about some problem with their sexuality or gender. Ellie was a lesbian in the first Last of Us, and her sexual orientation was never an issue during a time where the world was completely fucked. And now you have Ellie in this game, who's stuck in some weird three-way love triangle, and we constantly have to hear the problems that come out of it.
I would never... Fuck, this is awkward.
And then there's the whole scene with Ellie getting into a fight with some old homophobic man. That shit didn't even seem real to me. You're telling me that in a world as fucked up as The Last of Us's world, there's some old guy sitting there saying, hey you lesbians, stop that shit. I'm sorry, but I don't really buy that. Lev is actually the only one that has a problem with his gender that legitimately makes sense in the story. But this storyline is ruined by the constant reminder that anyone who is different in the Last of Us world has to have a problem related to that difference. And please don't think that I have problems with non-straight characters. I really do think this kind of representation is good, but I'd rather see representation that includes well-written characters and good storylines for them. The best way I can describe this game is by talking about Ellie and Joel playing the guitar. Towards the beginning of the game, when you have hope of this living up to the first game, you hear Joel playing his guitar beautifully, and you hear Ellie practicing playing the guitar the same way throughout the game. And it's not bad, but it's not great either. By the end of the game, the beautiful music turns into fingerless guitar strumming that misses too many notes and leaves a lot to be desired. I give it a 6 out of 10. Now maybe go play this game.